The most of us here have been waiting for long to hear you speak now. With no further delay, may I request the chief guest to address the gathering. Sorry, because of the surprise, I forgot what we gathered here for. We'll have to launch the website first. Apologize, yeah? And I would request you to launch the website first, please.
So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to be quite informal today. I think we're among friends and community. It's really my pleasure to participate in this function today, and I appreciate the initiative taken by the youngsters in our community. I think if you look around us in the world, and the most recent example is the Brexit. You know, if you look at the statistics, all the young people wanted to stay in, and all the young and the old people wanted to leave without knowing what they were leaving. So, in many initiatives, we are bound by the baggage of the past, and I think it is extremely critical that the young blood, comes in with this initiative. And I think when I heard them up at the last meeting, I was very enthused. And when I see the response today, I'm further enthused that this initiative, I'm sure, will go a long way in rebuilding and bringing back our community to where it was. To some of you who were at the IBCN, part of what I'm going to say is going to be repetitive, but it's only 2 months ago that they had that function. And why it is repetitive is because if you look at the formation of these committees, the one on entrepreneurship development and scaling, the one on networking, the one on young entrepreneurs, and the one on financial advisory is very apt. And to some extent, what I said that day relates to what you need to do. And the way you form the committees, I'm glad you've approached it that way. And I think it is a step in the right direction. And I think you will meet with success as you move forward. So, our community has had a glorious past, but it is only so long that we can bask in that glory. In fact, I think that this initiative that you have started is a much needed impetus for our community. If one looks back at the preeminence of the Chettiar community and the preeminence it commanded in those days, this has been considerably reduced in terms of both wealth and influence in today's context. In my view, a lot of this has happened because for too long we have lived in the glory of our past, and somewhere along the line we have lost our spirit of entrepreneurship, which was the hallmark of our community. So I think what I'm going to speak to you about today, and some of the thoughts that I'm going to share with you today, is how we need to bring this back. How do we need to bring back this spirit of entrepreneurship? And in bringing back this entrepreneurship, it's all in the mind. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is some of the mindsets which are required in order to switch from being what we are to what we need to be as an entrepreneur. See, I think in order to be, and I'm glad the committees are all formed around this subject because I didn't know what the committees were going to be when I made my talk, but it is very relevant. I think the first thing we need to be is we need to be prepared to make decisions and not prevaricate. we have to understand that we are responsible for all our decisions, which are good or bad. Entrepreneurs have an incredible opportunity to create something from nothing in a way that it is not possible working for someone else. But this means making big decisions about what must be done, when and how. You cannot wait for things to happen or for someone to tell you what to do. You must make them happen. Successful entrepreneurs also understand that opportunities may be short-lived, and so to develop a sense of urgency helps in achieving their goals. So I think the first point for an entrepreneur is to make decisions. Not all decisions you make may be right, but on an average, if 80% or 70% of your decisions are right, I think you're ahead of the game. So please don't hesitate to make decisions. The second one, which is I think even more relevant, is what I would call as feeling uncomfortable in your new comfort employee. You are used to thinking inside the box when you work for somebody, rather than outside it. As an entrepreneur, there is no box. You see what others don't, you test new ideas, seize new territory, and you take risks. This requires courage, a thick skin, and ability to keep going despite rejection and some skepticism. And I think very often, if you look back at our community in the past, I think this comfort zone is what has dulled us into a lack of risk-taking and the spirit of growth. So we need to get out of this comfort zone. I'd share with you some of my personal moments through my career. When I first was sent to school in Dehradun, it's a long way from Chennai. But my father, late Mr. M.V. Arunachalam, sent me there because he said, look, if you have to possibly run a national business, you have to learn to speak in Hindi, curse in Punjabi, and count in Gujarati. Now, I remember that first train journey I had, and when we went past Vijayawada, I was not very happy about being sent to this school. I couldn't speak the language. Dehradun gets quite cold in winter, and it takes most of 3 days to reach there by train. And the first term in school was very difficult. But into the first year, I started to make friends, and we were only about 6-7 of us from the south, but most of my friends were from Delhi and Bombay. And I think as I started to pass out of school, I started enjoying it so much that I decided to stay on and do my college in Delhi. Now, if I look back, the major defining moment in life in getting out of that comfort zone was moving to the school and moving to study in Delhi. Because today, when I have to go often to deal with matters in Delhi, I'm able to speak the language, I'm able to deal with people who have been around, who know me as a friend rather than just as a business acquaintance. And you can, take their help without any hesitation. Also, the atmosphere does not appear to be hostile, so you don't feel uncomfortable when you land there, whether it's summer or winter. So I think the second important thing as we look to becoming entrepreneurs is please make sure in your mind that you're aware that you're getting out of your comfort zone. The third thing, and I'm very happy that you have a finance committee, is that basically being Chettiars, we must remember that numbers don't lie. Where numbers are concerned, it is enough, if you're an employee, to know what is going in and what is coming out. But as an entrepreneur, you better learn to love numbers fast, because your cash flow is what will keep you going, in or out of business. Ultimately, it is your sales, costs, profit and loss that will either give you sleepless nights or an enviable lifestyle. But without the guiding light of numbers, your business will continuously be heading for the rocks. So I think one of the success of our community in the past, of course, we've had some problems since then as a group, as a community, has been this being on top of the numbers, being on top of the cash flow. And I've heard people say, some of the elders say that, look, very often one of the principles that we operate in the group is that we should never go to a banker, the banker should come to you. Your debt equity should be not more than 0.4 to 1. And your leverage is what makes you be more prudent. So I think understanding cash flow and managing within that is extremely key. Yes, there are a number of new ideas, but all of us don't have to be in all the ideas. You can be and you can grow carefully, and that is the way to do it. The fourth one is whatever you do, you have to love your business, but we must be objective. When you work for somebody, you can keep on doing something you dislike, but just for the salary you do it. But as an entrepreneur, you will need to love your business because of the long efforts and long hours that you spend. Unless you have a passion for it, unless you think like an entrepreneur and not as an employee, you're working in rather than on the business. And I think this is what will make that critical difference. I think Ampa is a classic example where I've seen him through many challenging situations as he took over from his father and developed it into what it is today. So I think he had a passion to do something, and it was all the time that he spent in it, and that passion will make that difference. The next point, which is important to note as you become an entrepreneur, is that time is not linear. You work for somebody, you have a timetable. As an entrepreneur, there is no timetable. You have to work 24/7. You'll always be thinking about business, and there's no respite because you have to live and breathe it. Yes, to some extent it affects family life, but I think you can draw the balance as you get on with it, And I think today, with so much of high tech and IT and communication, the kind of effort required is not as bad as in the past. It's well networked. So if you discipline yourself, you can take care of that balance. But I think, there are, as much as we are meeting here as a group of, Nagaratars, there are so many other communities who are much more evolved in their networking. I was many years ago in Toronto, and as the head of Fertilizer Association, one of our agents was a Sikh, and he got together a party in honor of the Indian delegation. And I was amazed that in a Gurudwara outside Toronto, he got together something like 250 Sardars, who had come to support him in the cause. So there are a lot of these guys who have done this, and they are networked quite well. So I think it's great that you are making a beginning, and what we're going to see now in Dubai and subsequently in Chennai will foster this spirit of togetherness and entrepreneurship. The next rule of entrepreneurship is you have to enjoy breaking the rules. When you work somebody, you feel that if you break a rule, you'll get dismissed. But entrepreneurs should not be interested in status quo. They're always looking for different ways to do things. You have to acquire a larger perspective, a global perspective. You have to always look over the horizon and what is the next big thing that is going to happen in your area, and you have to be aware of it. Because otherwise things can pass you by, Today with the change in technology and with so much innovation all around us, We might be working very hard at something, but if we are not having that perspective, we get left behind. And the seventh point I'd like to make is you should be willing to take calculated risks. I'm firmly of the view that part of the reason our community sort of took a back seat over the years is because somewhere down the line the risk-taking ability dulled. Our forefathers would not have got to where they did without taking the calculated risks. The question we have to ask ourselves is, how did they get there in those early days when it was so much more difficult to access capital, deal in foreign lands? So today, if we are doing this, if we don't have that risk-taking ability, there is no way that, and I repeat calculated risk because it is not, you don't want to go wild and fall flat on your face. So since you are an entrepreneur, you are doing the calculation and you are taking the risk. It's not that somebody else is doing the calculation and you are taking the risk. So please bear that in mind. And I think in your journey, you need to have both a short-term and a long-term vision, because your mind has to be forward-thinking and positive, because during this journey, you will face a lot of roadblocks. And I can share with you over the last 7-8 years, as I've had this opportunity to head the group, we have grown largely by acquisition. We acquired 10 or 11 companies over the years in our related areas, because part of my philosophy was, in whatever business we do, we should be a number one regionally or nationally, or number two regionally or nationally. Otherwise, we can't play. And because only if you are large, you have the purchasing power and the buying power, and then you get good people to work for you. So what happens is, when you want to grow, you have to grow by acquisition. So as we grew, we had to take over companies. And in this you face hurdles and you get into trouble also. In fact, many of you are aware, last year, as I said, we took over 12 companies. And one of the takeovers, India has got draconian agencies like SEBI, and I got into a problem where they just came out with a show cause notice. I'm glad to inform you that last month, they themselves revoked it and said it was unjust what they had done. But the point I'm making is that to get this to happen, I had to go 3 times to Delhi and 4 times to Bombay to make my point and to get people to understand what they did was wrong. So you get stumbling blocks. But I think if you have a long-term vision, you're willing to remain positive, and you keep taking it as it comes, then I think clearly, you have a winning game. So I think maybe the last point I want to talk about is when to start. I think we need to start now. Most people underestimate the time it takes to make the transition to becoming an entrepreneur. So it is sensible to start shifting your mindset while you are still employed, perhaps even setting up a business to run alongside that could give you the opportunity to develop the skills required and then build the experience while you're still enjoying the safety net of a salary. And then at some point, you will almost certainly need to give up if you want to grow your business. So I think, you have formed this group, you have formed these committees, all I think well thought through. What I would say, and I was sharing with some of your committee members from the financial advisory side and the investment side. In July, I suggested to them that when you meet in Dubai, you have maybe 3 or 5 ideas which come, and your committees can screen and say, these are the 5 best business ideas. And I say, it doesn't have to be in e-commerce, it can be in business. For scaling up, it can be in business for new business. And I've offered that I will bring along with me, Jawahar Dr. Jawar Palniappan is a friend of mine. He lives in America. I've talked to him about this. I know a couple of other PE investors in London. And I said at least 4 to 5 good ideas in the first lot, which your committee screens, I will get people to look at seriously and fund. And nothing will give me greater pleasure than seeing, and of course these guys who have PE heads of people who are with me people who are with me in college in London and now extremely successful businessmen, around the world. And not all of them are Chettiars, but having been very close friends of mine, they love Chettinad. They've been to both my son's weddings in Pallatur and been guests of all the hospitable people in Pallatur. So they love Chettinad. So they have a strong feeling of safety when they invest in some ideas which are run by Chettiars, because they feel that money is safe. So I've actually made a note of that date in Dubai, and I've even given them advance notice to say that, look, this event is going to happen, so you need to come with me. And if your group and your committees can, distill and look at, screen the ideas and say these are the best 3 or best 5 ideas, I can assure you that this kind of support I am happy to give and bring people who will be looking to take it forward. At the end of the day, friends, sometimes I often wonder why Chettiars of today are not as successful as the Ambanis, Mittals or Jindals, or more recently the Bansals, Agarwals or Sharmas. With some soul searching, I think one of the problems is that we are not innovative enough and are not able to think big. So unless this mindset changes, our community will also become an also-ran. So it is time that we step ahead, reflect, and make a switch to becoming more entrepreneurial. We are fortunately in a country which is probably one of the few which has a high rate of growth and therefore a lot of opportunity. And there is a lot of opportunity for growth here. And I think probably this is being started by the youngsters again is a very good sign. And the timing of this in the current economy is also right. So I think there is a great future ahead. Thank you. I'd be happy to interact with any of you, and if you have any questions, thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, any questions from the audience? Please raise. One of us will come to you.
Good morning, sir. Very nice speech. I encourage you. And one question is there any age limit to start entrepreneurship, become entrepreneur? So somewhat family members discourage. So at the age of 50, you can't. You have to see family. So that is my question, sir.
It's all in your mind. I'm 63. It's all in your mind. And I think, you can, it's not necessary that you have to do it alone. You can have partners in what you do. And you can provide the stability. And if your mindset is still there, I think 50 is very young.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Yeah.
As Mr. Vellayan said that why we are not grown big as others from the north. One more perspective from my thing is, we are very strict in our values and beliefs. If we look into that also, then we will also grow big like Ambani's or someone else. Thank you. That's one of the perspective I had.
No, I'm not suggesting that, Ambani's is the best example. But, once a year I have a group leadership meet. And over the years, I have not ever called Ambani, but I've called Sunil Mittal, I've called, I've called Uday Kotak. Now, you don't say that all these guys are always flouting the law, because, Uday Kotak has grown an empire today, and from very humble beginnings, and he's grown it right in the nose, right under our nose, where banking was the base of Chettiars, and he has come up in this line. And he didn't break it, he didn't achieve it by breaking the rules. So I think we have to look at how to get around it, and maybe that's the way.
I'm Somu from Natrasankotai. One of the thought, looking at all these committees that has been formed, one of my feeling is, might be more support from spouse in the family and encouragement is required in terms of entrepreneurship development. Even when what I feel is, my dad is a director at National Engineering College, Koilpatti. He manages about 5,000 students and 300 employees there. But when he comes home, my mom keeps saying, what do you do all day long? You don't know anything, and there are better things that you could do. I think support from spouse would really, and some motivation from there would really help in doing entrepreneurship better. And I would like to hear about this from Vellayan sir, if he has seen anything different. Is it only in our community or is it across? How is it?
I've been married only once, so I haven't seen anything different. But let me just, share with you. You see, it is without doubt you need the support of the spouse in being a successful entrepreneur. My wife Lalita is a housewife, but without her support, I would not be able to run around as much as I am today. So some wives can be more active and you have to be supportive. Some wives will support you and when you are active. So you have to have the balance, There is no set thing. So, in different, there are different horses for different courses. And each family will have to find that balance. So I don't know exactly what the situation is in the example that you stated. But all I can say is that when you choose to be an entrepreneur, it is very important that the family works with you to support you. Because it will have its pluses and it will have its minuses also. In my role last year as president of the Indian Sugar Mill Association, I had to go to Delhi about 14 times, because the sugar industry was in a real dire straits. It was nearly collapsing, where the cane price was higher than the sugar price. So we lobbied and, I had good friends with Mr. Gadkari. Then we went to the Prime Minister. We came up with the ethanol policy, came up with the export policy, excise duty removal, so many things. Now sugar price is 35 today, so whole industry has changed. But the early morning flights coming back from Delhi, going and back and forth, if I did not have the support, or if I had constant, bickering about what's not happening, then I would have had problems. So I agree with you, support is required. It is also your ability to ensure how they are suitably occupied, or they are, doing something of their interest while you are pursuing your life's ambition. And I think that balance is something individuals only can develop.
And I've heard you speak about how family-owned businesses can transform into corporates, and you are one of the leading examples of that. And most of us, a lot of us, are family-owned businesses. Your thoughts on how we can handle that?
See, actually, I'm not saying it should not be family-owned and run, but what had happened was, once you get to a certain size, we realized, and I didn't realize this, my earlier generation, my father and uncle realized it, that if we have to compete nationally and if we have to be successful, we have to be managed professionally. And at the same time, in every generation, it's not all the family members who are equally capable to be professional. So it could be that in our generation, in my generation, out of the 7 people, only 4 people will get to the corporate board. The other people understand that they have other things to do in the group, but they are not having the professional inclination or capability to do. So the way to approach it is that if you are a shareholder, is having a professional there going to create more value, or just by this fact that you are the owner sitting there going to have more value or erode more value? So what we have done is we have an external board which does the assessment of family members. So in fact, our external board consists of Mr. Ishat Hussain, who is the finance director of Tata's. It consists of Mr. Uday Khanna, who is chairman of Lafarge and Castrol, and one Professor Sridhar Iyengar, who was ex-KPMG chairman from the US. So they actually do an assessment of me and my cousins, and at the end of the year, they actually give us a rating and decide our increment. So I think the reason we have done this is because our board consists of 5 professionals and 2 of us as family members. And this balance has worked well. Maybe some other family members will come on top now, but they have to make the grade. And what they say is, roughly by about 45 or so, the corporate board members are able to assess whether the person has got the capability, or you got the fire, or you got the passion or the professionalism to achieve. Because, it is a tough world outside. You have to deal with the government, you have to deal with competition, you have to deal with suppliers, you have to deal with, overseas and environment issues. So unless you're willing to do this and got the, energy and nerve and the thick skin to do it, you better not get into that position, otherwise you'll erode value.
As we are just on time, we'll have one last question, please.
And very good morning. This is Lena Natarajan from Ulagambatti. If I remember right, yours is the 4th or 5th generation and multi-billion group. And most of us, including Karmuthu and all that, within the first generation, they are not able to take it to the next generation. And what is your advice for the youth to take up our business to the next generation to scale up further and further, so that the 3rd or 4th generation become very big and sizable? And I request your advice and suggestions to the youth to take up our business to the next level. Thank you.
See, I think you have to distinguish between ownership and management. So I would say that you have to first make an objective assessment whether your son is capable or your daughter is capable, and he or she has got the passion and is willing to run that extra mile. Otherwise, the shareholding can go to the next generation, but let the management be professional. So if you have a larger number, and here I would urge, one of the successes of our family, I would look back, is that we stayed together. We are cousins, and we are now 4th generation, my children are 5th generation. We have stayed together, and that requires some discipline and give and take, It requires a lot of cooperation from the women in the family also, but normally in our situation we've handled that differently. But I think what is important is that you have to make that critical assessment, although he's your son or she's your daughter, whether she has the capability, and if she has, then back it and make sure that it continues. Then you give the training. Do not hesitate to do the skill development for them. Send them to courses, in US or UK or wherever it is, to build their skill sets. Even have people as trainers for them for specific aspects of their attributes which are required in business today. Ensure that they learn Hindi and are able to at least know one language and feel familiar, because the reality is we have to deal with the environment. You cannot wish it away. So these are few things which if you do, and most importantly, I think if you're a larger family, I think the only way you can stay together and grow generation to generation is not by money, is not by force, it is only by love and affection.
Last question. Thank you. Running short of time, you can interact with Annan after the break.
request, it's not a question. We need your continued support for the young Nagaratas who are just finishing the course as well. Because Murugappa Group has always supported young Chettiars, Nagaratas who have been, they've been giving projects, good projects. In fact, I was one of the beneficiaries, was about 18 crores I've done for Coromandel Engineering for the last 2 years. So we require the same support for the youngsters as well, because when Murugappa Group gives projects, then it is easier for them. There's a platform, then they can take it up to the next level, then we get even bigger orders from Datas. So your continued support is our request. And
So certainly I think if you identify the areas in which they are going to operate, and if there is a fit between what we are doing and what they are doing, certainly other things being equal, I'd like to, I'll facilitate with our group people on how to take it forward.
Thank you.
Thank you for such a wonderful, inspirational, motivational speech.